Chaf Daled on Beis, I believe, right? Chaf Daled on Beis, 48. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines on the top. Yerushalmi Bava. You have it? Yeah. All right. The Yerushalmi Bava. It says that he inherits her. In other words, the husband inherits the wife. This is assuming that the pasuk is joined by Yerushalmi Bava, that the husband inherits the wife, and that Yerushalmi Bava is the Raisa, that's the Raisa. So then we darshan this pasuk. Yo kashem shu yorsho kachi rashdo. Is it true that just like he inherits her, so too she inherits him? Tam lomar osa. Her. Who Yerushah, he inherits her. He ain't no Yerushah, she does not inherit him. This is actually, I don't think the pasuk. I didn't even bother looking it up, but I don't actually think the pasuk is talking about a wife. Not right here. Let me just look quickly. Pasuk is in Parshas Pinchas. And it is, it's not at all talking about women as even, it's talking about the land. It says, if there are no, this is in chapter 20, I have an article of Tanakh here, chapter 27, verse 11. If there are no brothers of his father, you shall give his inheritance to the relative who is closest to him of his family, and he shall inherit it. Now, the it here is spelled is written Hebrew osa. So, really, the pasuk has nothing to do with a wife. The pasuk, the word osa in the pasuk does not connote your wife, but connotes a piece of land. I guess one could make some connection there, but this drasha here, is really would seem just an asmachta ba'alma, since it's not a true drasha. Since the pasuk itself is not referring at all to women, but to pieces of land. Anyway, that's the pasuk. She does not inherit him. Now, according to Chachamim, we hold that the Yerushalmi Bava is not the Raisa, that we don't make this drasha in Bamidbar Chav Zayin, which certainly seems again to be an asmachta. Via Yarsha, then upon a wife's death, her husband wouldn't, the Raisa, or her father would inherit her, her brothers would inherit her, her husband would not inherit her. Baba asks the question, if you say, now take out the word she'ein, the Skorial and the Marapanim take it out, Yoreshes Isha, which is really Yerushalmi Bava. If you hold the inheritance of a wife, meaning the husband's inheritance wife is the Raisa, me'at of that case, Yerushalmi Bava so. Why does a betrothed fiance not inherit his betrothed? Why is it only a fully married individual? Why is it not from the time of Erusin? That's to do with marriage. Marriage, the Chorah begins at the time of betrothal. So it says, well, I'll tell you a very interesting answer. Command Tamar, just like you say over there, with Kohanim, who cannot become Tameh for relatives unless they're very close ones, right? The 7 closest relatives, including Kohen, may not go to the Levaya of his Arusa, a girl he has just done Kiddushin and not Nisuin to. So we learn out for there. Command Tamar min HaKarov. We learn out for it says Krov, it says here Krova, but it should be Karov. Sheiro HaKrovoi. No, actually I think it says Sheiro HaKarov. I don't know. Anyway, it says Karov HaKrova it says both here by relatives you inherit, and so therefore over there and over there by Kohen. Just like over there we say HaKarov or HaKrova, Lo Yerusha. Now Lieberman changes, I think he's correct, he changes it to Arusa. that it doesn't include your betrothed. It only includes a woman who's fully married to you. So too the Kabbalah, so too by us by inheritance. Hakarov lo arusa. It's somebody who's related to you, fully not betrothed. Now, this is, of course, as I mentioned yesterday, this is going to opinion which holds that Yerusha Baal is the Raisa, but it is a different Yerusha than the other type of Yerusha. All the Yerushas come from the halacha of Mishmush, which is direct lineage through the patrilineal descent. Now, halacha of Yerusha Baal is a lateral halacha, which is called Yerusha She'er. In order to be She'er, it has to be fully married, otherwise it doesn't have a parameter of She'er, which is, of course, fully married. Hey, so Ravnuna has further. If you say, again, this squirrel takes out She'ain, in other words, that the Yerusha Sabal, the husband's inheritance of his wife is the Raisa. The husband should inherit property which is due to his wife, but his wife has not yet collected upon that outstanding loan yet, just as he inherits the property she's holding on to. And we know that a husband does not. He only inherits that which is musak, not that which is suitable to come in. Some Rabbi Yosef said, Kach shana Rebbe. And this is all part of the question. Then Rabbi Yosef say, Kach shana Rebbe, the Rebbe taught us, Ein about note baroik of a musak. A husband does not get stuff which could come into his wife and comes in after death, only stuff which she's holding on to at the time of her death. Some Rabbi Yosef said, I'll tell you, that's not an impediment to saying Yerusha Sabal is the Raisa, because I have elsewhere where that happens. Harei Bechor, we had last night, a Bechor, at least under certain circumstances, not clear, it could be in Machlokas, Bavli, Yerushalmi, where precisely it applies, but Harei Bechor, Harei Yerushalso Torah, a Bechor inherits me the Raisa, Ve'eno Yosh, Baroik of a Musak, yet he does not inherit with property that is loy, only property which is musak, in other words, property which is due to his father. At the time of his father's death, he doesn't get double in, only property which is actually in the possession of his father at the time of his father's death. So to here may well be the same thing. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Villain the custom, those who write in to their wives the following pledge. In Misas Blo Bonin, anything which, if I die without a progeny, called the law, anything which you brought into marriage as a dowry, Yachsor Lavia should go back to her father. Then Tanai Mammon, it's a Tanai Mammon, it's a Tanai in something which is Dinim Mammonis, and who Tanoi Kaim, and the Tanai is valid. So that's actually not Masda Mashkosa B'Torah. It's not considered to go against the Graham Torah itself. Now, it's not clear if this argues on the Sugya Amar Alf. The Sugya Amar Alf, which we learned last night, holds that the husband cannot remove himself from the inheritance of his wife if Yerusha Zabal is the Raisa. So maybe this argument holds even Yerusha Zabal is the Raisa, you can still remove yourself from inheriting, and then we'd argue on what we learned last night. Or it could be that this sugi holds that Yerusha Zabal is the Rabbanan, not the Raisa, and that's why he could make such a condition. Lieberman brings on Machlokas Rishonim, who here is making the stipulation with the husband. Is it the father making the stipulation, the father of the bride with his future son-in-law, or it's the husband making the stipulation on his own initiative? So it seems to me if the father is making the stipulation, it may well be that even if Yerusha Sabal is Doraisa, nevertheless the father's stipulation here is actually a condition which he can make as the person giving the property as dowry, and therefore that would impede upon the full acquisition of the property by the husband. But if Yerusha Sabal, but we're talking about the husband making the condition here, then of course we learned on Amar Aleph that husbands cannot make conditions to remove themselves from the right to inherit if you hold Yerusha Sabal Doraisa. So therefore it would be difficult what exactly is going on here, what changed on the base that we would hold that a husband can remove himself. Okay? Says Gemara further, it's the other shiur. Uskuv Holidas Yoir. Skuv gave birth to Yair. Now this is a pasuk in Divrei Yomi. It's an interesting pasuk in Divrei Yomi, and actually I looked it up. I have a Tanakh with me. It says there that Skuv gave birth to Yair. Yair had 23 cities in the land of Gilad, which is on the other side of the Jordan River, right? Now, the question here, which Rabbi raised by, is that the pasuk in Divrei Yom says that Skuv was the son of Chetzron, who was from Shevet Yehuda, and Yoyer, who was Chetzron's grandson, had 23 cities in the area of Menashe. Now, so how did this happen that Yoyer got these 23 cities? On a tangent, I should say, it also contradicts the Chumash itself. The Chumash itself in Bamidbar, Perek Lamed Bey, says that Skuf and Yoyer were children of Machir, the son of Menashe, not children of Chetzron. So how in Divrei Yomim could they be children of Chetzron? So the Malbim gives a very interesting answer, which I think is too radical to accept, which he says that it says that Chetzron gave birth to Skuf through his concubine. And he wants to say that the only time we follow patrilineal descent in determining Shevet is when the mother and father are married to each other. But when the mother is a concubine of the father, in that case, the progeny goes after the Shevet of the mother. It's an amazing concept. So that's why he wants to say that even though Skuv and his son Yoyer were progeny of Chetzron, nonetheless, since their mother's from Menashe, she was only a concubine, not a wife, so therefore they follow Shevet Menashe. Now, be that as it may, the Lamaisa, the Gemara, as I said, is bothered here by how Skuv, on the other hand, can belong to Yehuda, and also Yoyer. Yoyer has 23 cities in Menashe. So it must be, says the Gemara, Yoyer Orim. Be'ever Har Gilad, how did Yoyer have cities in Har Gilad, which obviously did not belong to Yehuda, but rather to Menashe? The Gemara concludes that he must have married a woman from the daughters of Menashe, who Mason she died, but Yersha, and he inherited her. So you're going to say Yerushalmi not the Raisa. The name of Vahila Skuf, and somehow we would have to go back to the initial distribution when they entered the land of Israel. And these cities should have had to have gone somehow to Skuf. If Yoyer has them later on, it must be that somehow or another Yerushalmi Bava, his inheritance of his wife, was what got him these cities. Similarly, Kabbalah says in the last pasuk in Yoshua, the Elazar ben Aaron Mace. It says there, the Elazar ben Aaron died. Then they buried him. It says in that pasuk on the hill of Pinchas his son, Givas Pinchas Beno, which was given to Pinchas in Har Ephraim. That's all the pasuk. So the question here again is the same question: how Pinchas was a Levi, right? He was a Kohen. So how do you get a city in Har Ephraim? So Chiminayna Yulu Pinchas Bar Ephraim. El Shinotzi Shemnos Ephraim. So the Gemara says he must have married a woman from the tribe of Ephraim. Ve'Yarsha, and he inherited her when she died, and that's how we got the city in Har Ephraim. Again, if you hold Yusha's the husband is not the Raisa, name of Vahili Elazar, so somehow it should have been Elazar's as well, and somehow would have had to be given to them by Yoshua and the Eretz Yisrael. So it said only the hill of Pinchas, his son, it must be Ela Vahili Pinchas teaches us that Pinchas must have inherited it from one of his wives. Okay? Halach above. So he writes his property to other people other than his son. In other words, he writes it all. I mentioned this last night. He writes his property to other people other than his son, and forsakes his own children. Masha also, so what he did, which he did, takes effect. But Chazal are not happy with this individual, that he did such a thing. If his children were not upstanding citizens, they didn't conduct themselves properly, then he is commemorated for good. In other words, Gesundheit, let him deprive his children of the property, disown them. They don't deserve it since they're not conducting themselves as proper people. Rabbi said that because in the Chos of Lacherim, somebody writes his property unto others, but Banav forsakes his own children. All love or Omer concerning him, it says, they're the way the Ito, one of the Rishonim, explains it. Their iniquities are carved on their bones, meaning even after their death they are committing sins, because even after their death They've committed the sin of removing the property from their own children, giving it to others. Now there's a story like this, a certain individual that Afkin Nechasa Nichsei Gabi Rabbi Bava Memo. He gave his property for safekeeping to Rabbi Bava Memo. He said to Rabbi Bava Memo, Amalei, In Hadim Benoi Dahanya, if my children are upstanding citizens, have one power, you take half my property, give them half my property, the Sal power, you take half the property. Now there's a whole Amud Yerushalmi on the bottom, who goes on for several pages. How was Rabbi Bar Memo allowed to take the property himself and deprive the children of half of the property? And then he has another, goes off on a tangent for a long time. He asks how Avraham Avinu, before the Torah was given, gave the children of his concubines only gifts. Right? Why? How could he not give them a proper portion as he gave his son Yitzchak? This would be going against his Gemara. So I would say, in terms of this issue over here, in terms of our issue here in the Gemara, that Rabbi Bava Memo was obviously a Rosh Hashiva or a Rav, and therefore he was giving his property to Rabbi Bava Memo as tzedakah or as a Yisachar Zvulun type relationship. So that's not comparable to shifting bequests to another individual render, but rather here the father was trying to get some do something laudable with his money, and therefore he would not be critiqued for that, and Rabbi Bava Memo would be pleased to participate in that. And Yerushalmi gives other answers. I don't think as good answers as this simple one which I'm giving. But on the question of Avraham Avinu and what he gave the Bnei Pelagshim, it's interesting. One of the reasons he mentions, one of the answers he gives, how Avraham Avinu gave the children of Pelagshim only matanos, is that it says the reason why you shouldn't switch property from one to the other, maybe you'll have good grandchildren, so it might leap a generation. So Chaval to give them a loss, right? So it says there, Avraham Avinu was a Navi. He saw Baruch HaKodesh that from the children of the concubines, no good would ever come. So therefore, he was justified in that case to remove the property from the Bnei Keturah, from the children of the concubines, and give it to Yitzchak instead. Okay, getting back to the story. So he says, Asum Benoi V'Nasrim Balga. After the father's death, the children came and took half. B'Sar Yomin Asun Boin Meyor Imei. Sometime later, they came and they wanted to make a machlokas with him and claim the other half, which Rabbi Bava Memo had received from their father. So he said, Lo Amali Avuchon, did your father not tell me Eli Havion Benaye Dahanya Havlon Palga? If I have good children, worthy children, give them half. B'Sar Palga, you take half. Gedon Atun Kaku Padi Pite. Now you are ruffians or evildoers. Kadu Kaku Padi Pite is some distortion of some Greek word for malcreants. That's actually what the Pnei Moshe says here. Or miscreants. In other words, you're doing things which are improper. If anything, I should take back from you the 50% which you did get, because now you don't even deserve that 50%. Okay, Halacha Zayin. Homer said, B'ni Neman. Somebody says, this is my child. He's believed to say so. And that person inherits together with his other children or as his sole heir. If a person says, this is my brother, Eno Neman. He's not believed. He believes on his son. We learn of he's entitled to recognize for us and identify for us who is his children, who are his children, but he's not entitled to identify for us who are his brothers. So Yitol Imo B'Chelko. So that's the case. Somebody who we divided, let's say Ruvain, Shimon and Levi are brothers, and Reuben identified Yehuda as the fourth brother of fourth brother of theirs. Shimon and Levi deny that affinity. So therefore, Reuven is stuck with Yehuda as a brother, but Shimon and Levi are not. Therefore, if they inherit something, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda can get a portion, but only he only has a rider on a part of Reuven's portion, because only Reuven has accepted his status as brother. Vice versa, however, if that fourth brother Yehuda died, any property he did get, well, in that case, any property would revert automatically to Reuven, right? If, however, this Yehuda got property from elsewhere, and then he dies, and his estate was childless, so then the estate is left to the other three brothers. It should be Yershu Achiv Imo, because in that case, Shimon Levi come to say, Reuven, so since it's to our advantage, we believe you that he's our brother. So therefore, we have to split everything equally, okay, among ourselves. Even though you're the one who knew it, we didn't know it. It says more further, Mishamesh says, somebody who died and it was found the gift of a shchimera, a will, tied onto his thigh. Ain't a klum, it's not valid because documents only work during one's lifetime, and this one was only found after death. Zika balacher, if however he gave this document during his lifetime to somebody else, or rather he made the document effective in his lifetime, whether to heirs or not to heirs, then that is sustained. Says Umar, if we assumed all these years that Reuven was Yaakov's son, B'shas Misas on the time of his death, Omar said, Eino B'no is not believed, then there's something missing here. And the Skorial, the Gear says, Eino Ne'eman. He's not believed at the time of his death. And Mar upon him speaks that he, I guess, had this Girsa too, and some from somewhere, or he hypothesized this Girsa, and he has some great deal of discussion at the bottom of the Mar upon him. Why the father is not believed to say at the time of his death that this is not my son. So it could be that he's only believed to say positively who his son is, but not who his son is not. He's believed even though he identifies his son positively to say his son is a mamzer, to say it's his son through an illicit wife, but he's not believed to say somebody who's not his son outright. Okay, so that might be one possible interpretation. In any event, the Gemara goes further. The word says, if somebody says somebody had there was somebody who was assumed not to have been his kid, and Omar B'ni says, this is my son, that is believed. In other words, he does have credibility to come and say positive things, even as negative consequences, but not credibility to say negative things. If somebody's standing next to a tax collector, Varmei said about certain individuals accompanying Beniu, it's my son. The Chazar Varmei, later on he came and said, Avdihu, he's my slave. I just said he's my son, so they wouldn't collect tax on him. Naaman he's believed. The person on the other end has said, when they're passing through customs, Avdihu, that's my slave. The Chazar Varmei Benihu, then he turned around and said later on, to my child. Eino Naaman is not believed because no idiot pays taxes or customs, actually would be the proper term here, unless they actually have to. So therefore he would not have lied about his son, who's duty-free, and said that this son is an Eved who requires customs as he passes. Now, whatever person, Tani, however, there are those who say Naaman, the father is believed, he said somebody is an Eved, later on to say it's a son, but not, the most Achronim assume that not in front of the tax collector, not once he passes the tax collector. That would be too much. In other words, no Jew pays money if they don't have to. Rather, this is a case, about a case where you have a certain social community who compel their children to work far too much. So therefore, most children feel they're going to work far too much. So therefore, but they hear even the parents can see the point, and therefore they call their children avodim. So therefore, the parent calls his child an eved, and it's not in the context of a tax collector. Just assume that it's a borrowed terminology. It doesn't really mean that this kid is really his eved. Okay, are you all with me still? Yes. Okay, good. Rabbi Mana said. Oh, I just heard. However, somebody says, Yinosnu the Chosei Ploini, Vukoin. I probably should be given to so and so, and he is a Kohen. Now, the Eskoya has a gear here, Yinosnu Ko the Chosei Ploini, all my property, and that would make it the gift of a Shchimera, which is effective even verbally. And that individual is a Kohen, the recipient is a Kohen. But Yusham Avodim, and there are slaves in the gift. Abi Shamar Yev Shibahan, even though the Kohen said he refuses the gift, Yochel Bar B'Truma, these slaves can eat Truma. Now the question is, of course, why if the Kohen refused the gift? Shalom became a Shamar Yev Shibahan, Zochel Bahan Yoshim, not true. If the Kohen, the recipient, repudiated the gift, then the heirs of the dying individual, they acquire the slaves. Now, Rabbi Lo said, Lo B'Stam Chalukim. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Rabbi Lo B'Stam Chalukim. The Rabbi had a case which is generic. What that means, we'll see momentarily. Monica, what are you talking about? Im Dover Bari Sharotzaben. It's clear the Kohen wanted these slaves. Everybody agrees that the slaves can eat Truma. If it's clear that the recipient does not want the slaves, so then everybody can see the heirs are the ones who get the slaves, not him. Okay, what we're talking about here is Rabbi Law said is Bistam, where we don't know what the Kohen intended. Rabbanan Sarbin, and later on he protests and says he didn't want it. In other words, at the time we received the slaves, we didn't say anything. Later on he said he doesn't want it. So Rabbanan Sarbin, so initially he wanted the slaves, but now he wants to renege. It's too late for him to renege. So there, the slaves are his, and therefore they eat Truma. Even if he says it's not possible later on, retroactively clarifies he never wanted slaves, and Zochar ben Yoshim, the heirs, acquire the slaves. Gamliel says, if a person gives a matna shchina, gives all his property over verbally to somebody as he lies dying, and then he gives it to somebody else instead. So the second gift counts as the first gift. In other words, he has the shchina, just like if he survives, he has the right to renege, so too as he's dying, he can change his mind over and over and over again. Chazal gave him that capacity to do so. Turning the page, Kafei and the base. Tells him if a person is alive and healthy and he gives a gift, he cannot change his mind and then give the gift to somebody else. That's obvious, right? Rabbi Abba, Baruch Hanan, Rabbi Yochanan, Shlokish, Rabbi Nomin, they both said, and they all said, Koshi Yavri V'Achsor B'Kunuso. General principle I just stated. Anybody who, if they got better, they're shchimira, they're dying, and they got better, they can renege on their gift. Choser Abman Nosu, you also renege in his gift while he is still lying there ill, even if he hasn't yet recovered. There's a certain case like this. Achsid Rabbi Chunya. So the wife Rabbi Chunya, she wrote over a property to Rabbi Chunya as she lay dying. Tzorcha, she needed the property, and she sold the property to her husband. Interesting what it means, she sold the property to her husband. But that's what she did. So obviously reneged on the gift. It means the Damchas, after she died, asked a boy, may or may. So Bichunia wanted to complain that he wanted to make a lawsuit and say it's his property, right? Because it was given to him first. Amar lei, so the husband said, Lama lo tavitun b'chayei. Chayei, why don't you come and discuss while she was alive to clarify the matter? Amar lei, so Rabbi Chunia said, little boys, I didn't want to cause her grief. She was dying anyway. Nevertheless, Apik Rabbi Ami compelled Rabbi Chunia to give it back. Why compel Rabbi Chunia to give it back? Because of the psak which we just said, that the person who's dying can change his mind over and over again until he reaches his final conclusion. So here too, his sister changed her mind, and Rabbi Chunia lost it, and the husband got it. Okay? Somebody writes his property over to his kids, so he has to write that. Now, this guy who wants to retain ownership while he's still alive, not ownership. He wants to give the kinyan. He wants the kinyan payers. Wants to write the fruit while he's still alive, but the kinyan gufi already wants to give to his kids. Wants the title to be in his kids. I guess he's trying to hide the property for tax purposes, whatever the case may be. But he wants the title ready to be his kids. He just wants to be able to eat the fruit. Okay, so Tzarech Shitli has to write in the document, I'm giving you today and after death. So that splits the transaction in half. The payros I retain the right to eat. The title is the title, however, is yours. So I'll give you the payros after death, and I give you the title from today. Think Rabbi Yehuda, it's going Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you don't have to write Me'ayom because you write the date in the star. And he holds Manosh Shtar Mochiach, the date when the star indicates its effective date, and even though you didn't write Me'ayom Lachar Mitzvah, it's as if you wrote it. Okay? If in this case, if a person wrote the property to his son after his death, meaning the title is already his son's, but the fruit is still the father's. Because the father can't sell property because they're already written to the son. The son cannot sell because they are still in the father's domain. So neither of them can sell. Now, that doesn't mean they can't transact a sale. It means the sale doesn't take effect. Except, the father sold, the sale which he effected is temporary until he dies, and refers to the son. If the son sold it, then the buyer does not get it until the father dies, because it's obviously a speculative thing. Now, during the lifetime of the father, since he has a kinyan peiros, he can remove fruit and give it to anybody who wants to eat, since he owns the fruit. But that which he leaves harvested at the time of his death, that goes to the harei shiur, and that goes to his heirs. Says Gemara, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochim. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochim said, he brought the case in front of Rabbi Yochanan. If a person writes in his in a bill of a gift, I don't have to call it a bill of a gift, whatever, he writes a gift. So it's a valid gift. In other words, the gift takes place after death. The same thing like our Mishnah. It takes place after death. The goof, the title is immediately the buyer's. The peiros, the fruit, only goes to the buyer after his death, right? But meyom, that's true about a gift. Meyom lachar and a get, but if it was a get, you can't give a get from today and after you die. There's no such thing. Chavraya amrin kain. That was one way of phrasing it. We'll explain why in a minute. That was one way of expressing this dichotomy. The Chavraya said it more succinctly. The Chavra said, Kena Marley, this is what he said there. Eina hi srata, this is not the path, meaning that the path of death, the path of matana is not the same path as get. They work differently. Rabbi Yisrael had another version of the way Rabbi Yochanan expressed the dichotomy. He said, that getting the matana, they're not the same thing. Why not? Rabbi says, very cute distinction. I remember this is in the Bavli or not. I don't think so, but it's cute, regardless. Rabbi bin matana by gifting kaseh if he writes from today, matana brewery. He clearly wants the gift to be from today. So why do you write then after death? The shiur is to retain for himself the right to eat the fruit. But by get, if you wrote from today, then you should want to have the relationship severed altogether from now. Why would you write until after death? It must be l'shayar lo gufa, must be that he wanted to retain rights in his wife. Or he wanted to retain rights in his wife. That's not a get. The get is not a valid get. Do you understand that distinction? Hello? Yeah? Okay, good. Rabun Barkana said, Kumi Rabbi Law. In front of Rabbi Law, well, maybe, wait a second. Maybe L'Shayla Maisya there. Maybe he wants to divorce his wife from today. But he wants to retain the rights to any money she makes until he dies. That would be a sound monetary policy, right? So Amalei said you can't do that. You can't have a woman who's married to Ruvain, meaning her new husband, and her handiwork, the rights to her profits, go to her old husband, to Shimon. No, that relationship must be severed at the same time as the actual divorce. Okay? Rabbi Zera said, it's Mekaima. He sustained Rabbi Boom Bar Kahana's Rabbi Law's dichotomy, the svara, that there's you can't have separate the Maaseh there from the actual marriage, and you can't retain Maaseh there after you divorce her. And he said, he called Rabbi Law Bani D'Oraisa, a builder of Torah. Now we call builders of Torah people who give money. In the old days, Talmidei Chachamim were called the builders of Torah. Okay, weiter. Omer Tavi Avdi. On the phone, I see that got no laughs whatsoever. All right. Is anybody still there? Okay, no laughs. They're still there. Omer Tavi Avdi Asisi Ben Chorin. Somebody says, I made. Now this is a total jump. Somebody says, I made Tavi my slave. Tavi my slave I made free. Asisi Ben Chorim. So similar language, I made him free. Osani also Ben Chorin, I'm making free. Now this is all upon a person's deathbed, right? So these languages are languages which are being said by Shchimera. Berei Ben Chorin, he's free. Hareze Ben Chorin, this guy is free. Hareze Zocha, in all these cases, the Eved merits his freedom. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan said, there's a catch to this. That not true. You can't do it balpeh, even a shchimera or bilvad bishtar. You have to do a document. You know why? Because an Eved needs a bill of release, just like a woman needs a bill of divorce. An Eved needs a bill of release. Okay. Now, Yasa ben Chorin. What if you say my slave? He should be made a ben Chorin. Oh, Rebbe Omer Zachar says that's good enough. Chomim says that's a promise. That's not a statement of release. If you said in past or present tense, that's a statement of release. But to say in the future tense, that's a promise. That is not a release, and that does nothing. Somebody says, similar idea. So it says, a certain field, Nasati Uploni, I gave to so-and-so. The sooner load is given to him. Teshlo, let it be his. I let so-and-so take a portion of my property. Again, Shchimera, right, he's dying. So-and-so should hold on to my property. Lo Amar Klum, all this does not work. All these languages are not languages which work by Shchimera. What's a language which works by Shchimera? You say, I knew so and such supporting. Give it to him. Has to be a command that people fulfill his statement. However, what if a guy said, Tinas Lamato, he didn't say Tenu. He said, let it be given, which is, instead of active, go give it, he said, let it be given. So what's the story in that case? Says Rebbe Omer Zohar, Rebbe says the same thing. Chorim lo Zohar. Chorim say, no, it's an expression of intent, not a gift. Same like before by the slave. However, interesting thing, the koivinus hayoshim kind of you compel the heirs to sustain the words of the dead person. Now, this is the different. It was discussed in so many of the Bible. There are two possible things: there's matna shchimera, where the gift is a true gift. Then there's where a person who's dying expresses his desire. Well, in that case, we say that it is a mitzvah to fulfill his desire, but it's not mandatory. So it's a nice thing, but not mandatory. So here too, since he expresses intent, it's a nice thing, but not mandatory. Okay? That's called mitzvah l'kayin divrei meis. Tani, Rishon Gamliel says, Avakasev diatimon. Now nobody knows what diatimon is. Not Neil Lieberman, not anybody basically. And they ask around, but they don't know. But it's a language in Greek which has to do with giving a gift. Okay? So I have a case of diatimon belaz, you wrote that, which is a laz word. That's the same thing as giving a gift. Rabbi Chanan, Hashem Rabbi Yerushalmi Levi, he said he back then says already. I asked all the people in those languages, what in the world diatimon is below Amali Adam Dover. Nobody knew what it meant. Okay? Okay, but it means gift in some foreign language. Now, new sugya. Somebody says, Yinostu nechosai l'ploini. Somebody says that my property be given to so-and-so. Meis ploni l'ploni, once so-and-so dies, it should go to the next so-and-so. Meis ploni, once the second so-and-so dies, it be given Leploni to the third so-and-so. Now this is a case which in the Bible is called Acharecha. Let's give names to it. Reuven gives property to Shimon. Shimon is guy number one. He says, Shimon, this is your property until you die. Then it goes to Levi. He's guy number two. It will be Levi's property until Levi's died. Then it dies. Then it goes to Yehuda. He's guy number three. Okay? So there's the giver and three recipients in succession. After the death of the first recipient, the next one gets it, and so on and so forth. Do you have this transaction down pat? What? Sounds good? Okay. So now we're going to discuss it. So, Meis Hasheni B'chai Rishon. What if the second guy, which is Levi, right? Because Reuven gives to Shimon, he's the first recipient. The second recipient, Levi, dies during Shimon's lifetime. So when Shimon dies, it can't go to Levi because Levi is already 6 feet under, right? So in that case, the first guy continues to eat, Reuven continues to eat fruit until his death. If and when Reuven dies, he gives back to the, Shimon. I made a mistake. Shimon, the first recipient, continues to eat, and when Shimon dies, it goes back to the property reverts to Reuven. In other words, since it can't go to recipient number two, to Levi, it goes back to the giver, Reuven, or his heirs. Now, excuse me? Right. Now, but the thing is, this is in direct contradiction to the Bavli. The Bavli holds, and the Skoriel also is like the Bavli, that if Levi dies during Shimon's lifetime, Shimon gets to keep it forever, and Shimon's heirs inherit it. So there's a very, very big machlokes here between, on the one hand, the Yerushalmi, which we have in front of us, and on the other hand, the Bavli and the Skoriel. The Bavli, the Yerushalmi, which we have in front of us, holds that Shimon, the first recipient, must, upon his death, it reverts to Reuven or Reuven's heirs, the giver or the giver's heirs. According to the other version, the Yerushalmi, according to the Bavli, upon Shimon's death, it reverts not to Reuven or Reuven's heirs, but to Shimon himself's heirs. That is all assuming that Levi predeceased Shimon. Okay, is all that clear, that machlokas? It's going to come up in a few lines again. Now, Mesa Shlishi B'chai Sheni. What if Levi is not the one who dies, but Yehuda is the one who dies? Yehuda dies during Levi's lifetime. So it should be here, the Shaitar so changes it to Asheni, El Chaperos. And when Levi dies, so again, according to the Bavli, when Levi dies, his heirs get it. But according to the Yerushalmi, again, and I don't know what this Skoriel does with this line, the Chorah should have to change his line as well, but according to the Yerushalmi here, then when Levi dies, since there is no Yehuda, it reverts to Reuven, the giver's heirs, which is a big chiddush. Okay? Meisa Sheni Vashlishi. Now, the next case is simple. Meisa Sheni Vashlishi. Shimon is alive, the first recipient, but Levi and Yehuda both died. So Rishon Ochel Peiros, the first guy eats fruit. Now, that's obvious, but now comes the chiddush, where new machlokas. The konet karka. Now, everybody scratches their heads at this one. What does it mean? Reuven, while Reuven is eating fruit, then he can acquire land. Okay, what does it mean? He can acquire land. I'll come back to a minute. Divrei Rebbe. Shalom Yomer Enu El Achilas Peiros Bilvad. The Rishon only has Achilas Peiros. Now, I think what's going on here is like this. The Shimon can only eat fruit. What I think is going on is like this. And it seems to me the Ritbaz gives me a little bit of support here. The Bavli holds that each guy in turn is the full and complete owner. It's never going back to Reuven. Ever. Never. Right? Once Shimon gets it, if Levi predeceases Shimon, Shimon's heirs gets it. Once Levi gets it, if Yehuda predeceases Levi, Levi's heirs get it. It's never going back to Reuven. But according to the Yerushalmi, it's quite likely that eventually the property will go back to Reuven. So the question is, if Reuven retains some underlying right, is there limitation in the Shimon, Levi's, and Yehuda's capacity to use the field and its profits in the meantime. And it's machlokas here. Rebbe holds there is no limitation. He says you can eat the fruit and use the land, perhaps even sell the land, as we shall see momentarily, to buy other land. In other words, you could use it for whatever you want. No, all you get to do is eat the fruit. That's it. You can't use it for any other purpose. Now, I want to stress a very interesting thing here, which is, in the Bible, Rashid Gamliel says, you can sell the land. You can sell the land? In other words, even though Reuven might eventually get it back, in the meantime, as long as Shimon has it, he can sell it. Even though Levi is never going to get it as a result, still Shimon can sell it. Levi can sell it, even though Yehuda is never going to get it as a result. There's a Gemara which we had recently in the Masechta Sait, in the morning Daf Yomi, said that one of the people is called in Russia Arum, is a person who gives counsel to, in a such case like this of Acharecha, to Shimon to sell before the property goes to Levi, or for Levi to sell before the property goes to Yehuda, because even though it works, the sale was valid, it's condemned because it's going against Reuven's expressed intent that there should be a succession from Shimon to Levi to Yehuda. Okay? So it's hard to reconcile Shimon Gamliel's position over here, that you're limited in your usage, and yet at the same time, that you're allowed to say that if you sold it, the sale is valid. Perhaps it's only according to the Bavli, that it never reverts to the giver, that the sale of each recipient in turn is valid. But perhaps one could say like this, that the Yerushalmi is saying, of course it reverts to the giver, but its potential can revert to the giver if the order of succession, if the order of succession is not followed properly. That may well be the case. However, Lemaisa, it's possible to say this follows. The Rishon Gamliel holds, you can sell the land when you have the possession of it. In the terms of the use of the fruit, however, you cannot use the fruit which you get for speculative purposes. Even the fruit itself, this is not your field for investment to buy land. Even from the fruit of the land, what Reuven intended in giving the land in turn to Shimon and then to Levi and then to Yehuda was to keep each one of them achilas peiros to sustain them during their lifetimes. But it's not given to them to even use some potential excess profits in order to be able to speculate and buy land for some purpose. Now, again, as I said, it's true they can sell the land, and if they sell the land, they disrupt the entire process. But if they don't sell the land, and they're just doing achilas peiros, so the achilas peiros which they have is limited to achilas peiros as sustenance personally. Otherwise, they can't do anything with it, any profit then, excess, above and beyond what the simple achilas peiros, which I will go into in some detail in a few lines, it would revert then as well as the field, if the succession was broken, to Reuven. There's an amazing concept that might be totally wrong. The Shari so changes the girsa here. He really messes around with the whole Gemara, so as not to come to the conclusion which I just came to. But I will follow through with this conclusion in the subsequent Gemara. Chizkiah says halacha is like Rebbe, that you're limited in what you can do, and that you're not limited in what you can do. You can do whatever you want. Now, in order to say, the reason why I wanted to say what I said, which is very torturous a moment ago, was because the Bavli Pasner Shimon Gamliel that you can sell. You have the right to sell. So, and yet at the same time, here we're passing like Rebbe that Olga Peres the kind of karka. It would be difficult to say that difficult to say that Rishon Gamliel argues here in the Yerushalmi what he says in the Bavli parts of Rishon Gamliel over here, they are not over here. So therefore, I would say there's two separate machloiksim. The two separate machloiksim, one could say it concerns the permitted use of the fields, and that Rebbe gives broader latitude to permitted use of the profits. I'm sorry. and that Rebbe can support her allowed to be possible like him. The other, and the Bavli, concerns whether the person has the right to sell it outright, and that he passes Shingamil that works, even though it runs counter to the giver's intent. Okay, all that I said right now might just be plain, simple babbling, but I think that might be a possible shot in the Yerushalmi. As we will go on, we'll see if there's some question, some possibility I'm correct. Rabbi Rabbi says, Moida, now here's a critical Escorial change. Mother Rabbi Shimon. And I think this is going to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's position, as I said, that you could sell the property outright. That's true, you can sell the property outright. But you can't, Shimon, Levi, or Yehuda, in turn, can sell the property, but they can't give it as a gift of a dying person. Now, why not? So the Ritbaz points out here, precisely because of what we've been talking about all along. Since our Shingamliya holds that you can only you're limited in your use of the fields, your use of the profits of the field. All you can use it for is basic sustenance. So therefore, yes, you can sell the field, because you can claim in your sale that you needed to raise cash for basic sustenance. But you can't give us a matna shchimera. As Shimon is dying, or as Levi is dying, to give this amount of shchimera, you can't claim you needed them for sustenance. Sustenance, you'll be dead in an hour. What kind of sustenance do you need? In that case, the matna shchimera does not go through. So Rishon Gamliel, we're adding a faster Rishon Gamliel's halacha that the Shimon or Levi could sell before it reaches Yehuda, which is that they can only sell it because they're under duress to raise money for Achilas Peiros. And they can't just give it at random like a matna shchimera to somebody. And therefore the Gemara goes on even further than this and says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan v'lo matnas bori, which the Gillian of Friday at the bottom says, shehik matna shchimera. If you're giving it as a gift, even if you're a well and healthy person, that also is like matna shchimera as far as we're concerned here. Why? Because you're not doing it to raise cash. You can't give it as a gift. You can only do it if you're trying to raise cash in order to sustain yourself. Okay, we're talking about, again, Shimon and Levi giving it as a gift before it actually reaches Yehuda. Kiador, like the following case which we had. A very fasting case. Now the Gilin Ephraim changes the gears around. I'm not sure you have to do it, but it just works. You can work it in even without changing yourself. But he says a certain individual gave property to a woman instead of a woman giving property to an individual. And this man gave this woman property in the form of an acharecha, the transaction we're just speaking about above. Right? So therefore, after the woman, it was supposed to go to somebody else. Now, in the course of her lifetime, however, tzarcha, she needed money. The Zavis and she sold the property to her husband. Sounds like a sham deal, but we're not going to get into that. So Bechir Bar Madia brought this case of Rabbi Yossi and asked if through by her having sold the property to her husband, this disrupts the acharecha process, and the man who's supposed to get it after this woman is never going to get it. Rabbi Yochanan said, let's get it. So, Lokan and Rabbi Yossi, so Rabbi Chir B'Amadia's question, Lokan and Rabbi Yanai, Boda Rebbe, Sheidan Hais the Matna Shchimera, and that should be again Rishon Gamliel, according to what the Escorial says. that Rabbi Shimon concedes that you can't give it as a gift, and this is giving it, this selling to her husband, the same is given like a gift, because what advantage does she achieve from this in terms of getting supported? So it says, well, yes, true, but he retorted. Rabbi Yochanan said, so he said back to him, Rabbi Yochanan said, Lo Matnas Bori. No, I got it wrong. Sorry. The first question, Lokem Rabbi Yanai Moder Rabbi Shimon Shein no sentence of a nosa matna shchimra, that was, well, this is not a gift, as a shchimra, she sold to her husband, so it should be a valid sale. But then the response was, Amalei Rabbi Yochanan, but yes, but Rabbi Yochanan said, who? You can't even give it as a gift of a well person. So this is a gift as a well person, which should not work as well. Her sale to husband should not work. This is more interesting, I think. No. Harda Isa, this woman, became the Baala Zakuk Misapkle Mizoine. Since her husband is one who supplies her with food, it should be low command shrimero. It's not like command shrimero. In other words, the reason she's selling her husband is because she wants to get more food from her husband. So therefore she's selling for her sustenance. So therefore it's a legitimate transaction. Says more, wait a minute. Ad Kedun, until now, and it should suffice for her, Zaka Misapka Pita Vakitne, it's got to give her bread and beans. Dilma Beit, do you think he has to give her eggs? Dilma Tagani, you think he has to give her chicken? In other words, a husband always has to support his wife, whether she sells him property or not. You're going to call this a sale for the purpose of sustenance? That's a pretty extraordinary things to say. She might get excess proper food if she sells the property. Maybe he'll give her, delicacies. But basic food she'll have nonetheless. So therefore, why should the sale be a valid sale? It says more fascinating thing. From that we learned that Rebbe says, and he brings a riot. This is actually his riot. Since Rebbe said that Shimon who sells can sell Shimon who can eat the fruit and sell fruit, or sell the land perhaps even as well, for the purpose of speculation, of raising money to buy land. So therefore, we should say the same thing in our case as well. We should say but no, not the same thing. Sorry, and that's Rebbe. Ram Shim Gamliel, who we're discussing now, Rosh Gamliel is the basis for the capacity to sell it, right? Because he's one of those holds you could sell. Rosh Gamliel should hold, like he says in his Malchokas with Rebbe, that he can only sell for basic needs, basic sustenance, because. Yes, Rebbe said you could sell the payros for even speculative purposes. Rosh Gamliel argued there. Rosh Gamliel says you can only do achilas payros itself, not for any speculative purposes. So too, even though that was not the topic of discussion previously, when he's selling the land itself, which Rosh Gamliel holds you may do, logic dictates that he should only allow you, according to this consistent thread in the Yerushalmi, that Rosh Gamliel holds you can only use the land for basic sustenance, you should only be allowed to sell the land for purpose of basic sustenance. And this woman, if she's selling the land to her husband, she's not selling for basic sustenance. It should not be a valid transaction. So it says, I'm turning the page. Lieberman takes out the first line and the first 4 words. The second line goes redundant with the Gemara later on. The Gemara says, no, afilu lo chal devarim meulim. You can even sell the property to eat delicacies. But that's also considered to be a form of eating. So therefore, the woman who sold to her husband was justified in doing so because she wanted to get delicacies to eat. It's still considered to be achilas peiros. What Shir Gamliel precluded when he said you can't sell the fruit, and what he holds you can't sell the land for is for the purpose of kriyas karka, for speculative purposes, or to use the money to reinvest. But if you're selling the land in order to raise money to eat the fruit, that's a legitimate transaction. Even if the fruit that you're going to try and get is delicacies, quail eggs, or whatever the case may be, it's still okay. Okay? Alright, says no further. Rabbi Yaakov Baracha. Rabbi Yaakov Baracha said, Tani Toma, we learned over there, Kivura kimizonos. Kivura, burial plots, are like food. Loyal kivura, therefore if a man or woman does not have a burial plot. In Maditane Rishon Ochel Peres V'Koine Karka, it says that Shimon can sell the land in order to can eat the fruits and use the fruit to buy land. Adamras teach us moicher karka lokech kvura. You can sell the land and buy not just food. But you can also buy a plot for burial. Now it's not clear who he's going in. Is he giving shot in Rebbe? And we didn't. As you say, that Rebbe and Shimon Gamliel really didn't argue so dramatically. Even Rebbe who says you can use your profits from this field to buy land. He meant only land for kvura, which is like mazonos, or is he saying that? He's saying that even Shimon Gamliel will concede to this. It's not clear what exactly is going on. But he wants to say a chiddush that sometimes Kavura is considered like Mazonos, said you can sell the land or use the profits to buy land for Kavura. Okay? That's the end of that sugya. Says the Gemara, going back to the Mishnah about Master Mashkos B'Torah. Actually, several Mishnahs again. Before. Amar Rabbi said, V'ilan the Kosvin, in Sanus, they write a premarital agreement, which is that if I hate you, I, the husband, end up hating you, the wife, or you, the wife, end up hating me, the husband. So the conditions will be changed to the ksuba. Tanai Mamanu, this is a Tanai Mama. The Kaimuna Rabbana hold that this works. So it's interesting. We see a precedent for premarital agreements, which actually manipulate the monetary terms of the marriage, even though the Torah might want them one way, but you can manipulate them based on needs in order to suit whatever potential pitfalls are going to be in this marriage. Okay, can we finish the parak? If a person left, by the way, the whole story is so not having seen any of you giving the shiur, I hope the study about Charecha came out with some degree of clarity, because it's very complicated. Anybody get any of it? What? It did come off as complicated. Okay, let me just repeat the bottom line of the Yerushalmi, because I feel very bad about it not being able to explain it in person, which is that unlike the Bible, the Rigbaz usually makes this point succinctly at the beginning of the Rigbaz and the Famaral. He says the Bible holds that the Mana Shchimera of in the case of Acharecha, if Shimon gives the properties of Mana Shchimera, it doesn't work, because Levi already has dibs on it. Mana Shchimera happens Lachar Misa, and by that point, so therefore, if Shimon tried to give us a Mana Shchimera, it doesn't work because Levi gets it prior to Mana Shchimera taking effect. For some reason, the Yerushalmi doesn't focus on that. The Yerushalmi rather focuses on the concept of the sale only being permitted in order to raise money to feed myself. And therefore, Mana Shchimera doesn't work because I can only use it to raise money to feed myself. Now, according to the Yerushalmi's whole focus on Acharecha is different than the Bavli's. The Bavli looks at it as a successive, very technically, as being a progressive or successive ownership. But the Yerushalmi, the way the Yerushalmi comes out, it looks at it not as being so much ownership, but rather as an arrangement by which the giver arranges for each person to be supported in turn by the field and by its production. And therefore the Bavli holds it never reverts back to the giver. Yerushalmi holds that there are cases in which it can revert back to the giver. And therefore there's a machlokas between Rebbe and Shimon Gamliel, besides the machlokas in the Bavli, which is not mentioned directly here, whether each person in turn can sell it or not. There's a machlokas here, what's considered to be necessities, which the Shimon or Levi or Yehuda can use the profits in order to acquire. Is it only for food, or is it even something other than that? And in turn, when you do sell the field, for what purpose you could sell? Can you only sell it for the purpose of basic necessities, or can you sell it even for something more than that? Those are the variables in Yerushalmi, all based on the assumption that this is a way of providing sustenance. To what extent does it provide sustenance? I don't know if that clarifies things anymore, but sorry. Halachates. Hiniach banim gedolim uktanim. If a man died and left adult and minor children, and a gedolim is part of the ktanim, the gedolim do not get support on the basis of the ktanim. The ktanim is on the gedolim, nor the ktanim on the basis of the gedolim. Ella chokim b'shav. They just divide up equally the state and let matters take care of themselves. Those gedolim yisu ktanim. If the adults if the older children took money from the estate in order to get married, so the younger children also take money from the estate in order to get money. However, if the younger children say that if the older children took out their money for their marriages while the father was still alive, and the younger children say after the father is dead we want to get the same thing, in Shem they don't get it. Which your father gave the older children a lifetime, and also that what they got, the younger children do not get it. Now what if it's father leaves no sons, only daughters? He leaves older and younger daughters. And of those response to the older ones are not get supported by the younger ones. Loktas is also upon those and not vice versa. Al-Chokos b'Shav distributed equally. Nisu G'dailos, Yisu Ktanis. Again, whatever the older daughters get from the state, the younger daughters get from the state. Zech Lemer, the Banos Yirbanim. There was a severity by daughters over sons. Shabanos Nizos Habanim, the daughters get fed at the brother's expense. In other words, whatever the brother's property the brothers inherited, the daughters have a lien on it for their mizonos, as long as it's in their brother's hands if they haven't sold it. And however, the sons do not get supported on the daughter's expense, which means that whatever the daughters get is the sons cannot tap into. I'm sorry, that's not what it means. Which means habonos in the zonos supposed. In other words, if you have some daughters who are more power-stricken than other daughters, then the more power-stricken ones cannot eat on the cheshbon of the other daughters. Daughters can eat off the cheshbon of sons, but daughters cannot eat off the cheshbon of other daughters. Okay, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Boikum Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah for Rabbi Zera. Not for Rabbi Vai. Let's say the older girls got married, the older boys, but let the older girls, Meg Rabin, on the basis of 100 barrels of wine, that was the dowry, or the cost of the wedding. At the time, 100 barrels of wine was worth 20 dinar. The Zira, the younger girls get married, Meg Rabin Diana, and if you give them 100 barrels of wine, there's been a diminished, they have a diminished value, and now they're only worth Tavin Asor dinar, they're only worth 10 dinar. So what do you give them? You give them the 100 barrels of wine, you give them the 20 dinar. Amalisa said, Kamada Nasrini Lane, you go after the money, which means you give the younger daughters the same monetary value they give the older daughters. You don't go by the commodity, but by the monetary value. Okay, that's all for tonight, folks. So tomorrow night, Reb Meir will know what the story is, and he will convey to the rest of you whether I'll be back in time to say shiur or not. If I'm not back in time to say shiur, or then I won't be giving shiur because I'll be on the road, and that I don't think I can do. While I'm in the car, even though I don't do the driving, I don't think I can give shiur at the same time. What? Yeah, it would be an amazing trip. Okay, that much of a magician I'm not. Anyway, have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.